You're listening to the AfterBuzz TV network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your number one source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, Dean Johnson.
The AfterBuzz Studios in Los Angeles, California. Presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is AfterBuzz TV's The Good Wife After Show. We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest news and gossip. And now, another post-game wrap-up show for your favorite TV show. It's AfterBuzz TV's The Good Wife After Show.
Hello, everybody out there, AfterBuzz Nation. I am Courtney Henderson. I am your host here for The Good Wife. I am going to touch base on the last two episodes we've had. They are quite the episodes. Episode 15 last week, Dramatics, Your Honor. And then tonight's episode 16, The Last Call. And I am actually alone in the studio tonight because my beautiful co-host Miriam has actually faced a loss of her own. And so we will go and do a full breakdown and recap of these two episodes together in the next week. So I apologize for her absence and we send all of our well wishes to her. But now on to the show's loss. Holy crap, you guys. Josh Charles is not on the show anymore. Last week, as we all know, spoiler alert if you haven't watched the show, which you shouldn't be listening to the after show if you haven't watched the show yet. But Josh Charles, I guess, didn't renew his contract, and somehow Juliana was able to convince him to do 15 episodes for season 5 to write him off the show in a proper way. Obviously the fans have outcried and in no way think that this is proper, because the idea of him being able to come back would always be something that we would want. We love Will. We always kind of wanted to see, well, I guess I'll speak for myself. I kind of always wanted to see her and Will come together at some point, be it Peter, dying or something happening to where they just don't end up staying together. But all of that said, I can see why Josh did it. I send my well wishes to him as well, and good luck in the future endeavors that he pursues outside of The Good Wife. I think that Michelle and Robert King are brilliant, are writers. They're actually the creators of the show also. And I agree with them. As some of you may or may not know, they have The Good Wife writers Twitter, and they actually released a public letter to the fans explaining why they did what they did, and hating that Will is gone, hating that Will is dead. I actually agree with what the writers said and why they killed him off, because for me, at least, and the fans like me, we would absolutely continue to cross our fingers that Will and Alicia would end up together, even if he was, across the country working in a new firm or a new office of their firm for Lockhart Gardner, or if he, basically, if anything but him dying happened, we would still cross our fingers and hope that he would come back and that they would somehow be together. And just, they couldn't do that. I mean, I think that really they did what they had to do, and it's really sad. And I think that making it something that feels somewhat random and abrupt, rather than getting sick or something like that, I think it was the best way to do it. And I think that it will be really interesting. I'll talk about it a little bit later, what happens and what this means for the rest of the show, especially with the writers and the cast members having known that this was coming. And one of the best kept secrets, I mean, I can't believe that this didn't get leaked earlier. I looked online and I could not find any article that predicted this or that leaked any of this insider information about Josh leaving and Will being killed off as how they get Josh off the show. So Miriam and I will go into greater detail on that whole episode. I just sort of want to give it a moment of reverence and not go too far into that without her. tonight's episode, the last call, which plays off of that so nicely. I don't know if any of you have had that last phone call where there's a voicemail, whether you'd heard it before the loss or not. But I've definitely been in that situation where you find out somebody called you and you don't know why, and you just continue to imagine and play the hypotheticals and the what ifs over and over and over of why they could have called or what they wanted. Or in Alicia's case, was he angry? Was he happy? Was he calling to confess his love? I mean, why was Will calling her? Because he gives her absolutely nothing, which, going on this whole randomness of him dying, as far as it's just in a court shooting and nobody could have predicted it, I think it's kind of just as perfect that the writers gave her nothing in this phone call. I mean, it's literally up to her and her imagination as to what Will could have possibly been calling about. And she goes on this, detective trail trying to figure out why Will called. And I almost feel like she wasn't actually dealing with the fact that he's dead as much as she was determined to find out why he called. I mean, that became the focus for her. And, we'll see now that she has as much closure as she's probably going to get, that the next couple episodes will be that will definitely have her grieving and showing what it is that this means for her. And I mean, we see that a little bit tonight. And a friend of mine and I were talking about this episode, and the episode is titled The Last Call, but jokingly said that it could be also titled How Many People Can We Make Cry on Screen? And we see Alicia cry, we see David Lee cry or tear up, we see Diane cry, we see Kalinda tear up, we see Cary, I guess not cry, but really give us something in that deposition that he does without Alicia because they can't delay. And even Eli and Peter both get a little emotional, not necessarily for the same reasons, just strictly for Will being gone, but what that actually means for them. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with Peter and his character, kind of knowing what Alicia and Will had, and we kind of see that in the previews for next week, for 2 weeks from now, and how this loss for Alicia really is going to affect the relationship that she has with Peter, that she fought to keep and chose to keep rather than to pursue being with Will or on her own after all of the things that he had done in cheating, etc., in the previous seasons. So I loved at the beginning of this episode tonight where it shows Alicia getting the call, which we saw, kind of that was recapping last week's episode. But we see her in the car and she just finally breaks down. And I know for myself, when I've lost somebody, there's no way I could or should be driving. And I kind of felt like that was a little bit of the writers being able to show a side of shock, but also a little bit of a strength. I mean, she's had to come out of a loss. She's faced a lot of trials in her life in these past 5 years with everything with her husband. I mean, and she's a politician's wife and a lawyer. I mean, she knows how to keep it together when you need to keep it together. And she gets in her car, and for the first time, she's able to kind of lose it because she's alone. And the first place that she goes is to Lockhart Gardner, and we see Diane walk in there and just big frame on the LG sign for Lockhart Gardner. And so interesting to think, will she keep it? I kind of feel like she'll keep it and just let them have it in his honor, because obviously there's no way that, how do you get rid of Gardner and Lockhart Gardner just because he's dead? I just don't think you can do that. Diane has to go in. She's late for a vote that they have. And instead of voting on opening up an LA office or not, she has to tell the other partners that Will is dead. And again, I love that they took a minute. They gave her a moment in her office to go compose herself, because, while they are lawyers, while they do face these kinds of tricky situations that for a lot of people are emotional, they're not allowed to get emotional, but this is her best friend, and she gets emotional uncontrollably, takes the moment, and then goes into the conference room and delivers with as much composure as she can that Will's dead. And she doesn't give a lot of detail, and everyone's of course up in a fit because Will's dead, and it's so abrupt. He's in court, and I think they don't show it, but I kind of feel like if you're at that level and you're a partner and you're sitting in that room and you find out that one of the partners died in court, no less, and was shot by his client, that you'd kind of have to take a minute and just kind of realize that could have been you, that could have been anyone. And later in the episode, when Alicia and Diane are talking, it comes out that was a client that should have been Alicia's, and maybe that's also going through her head, and maybe a little bit of the guilt of, holy cow, that should have been me, that shouldn't have been Will, or that could have been me, and instead was Will. And, there's just so many what ifs, and all of them are going to be stewing and thinking about that. And then, of course, we see David Lee, who apparently has a soul because he cries. And I think it's funny because it lasts about a microsecond, and I'm actually still not sure that I've decided if it was genuine or if it was like he was trying to cry, or if he started to cry but just it was so awkward for him because nothing would make him cry ever. So for whatever reason, David Lee goes and he takes a moment, gives himself that little breakdown, pulls himself back together, and then does the best thing that he can actually do to help Diane in the situation. He goes to help her make things right with their clients, let them know, especially Will's clients, what's going on, and kind of keep them and make sure that the firm is going to stand on 2 feet still. And I love that it doesn't even come up who or if or when they'll get a new partner to replace Will, if just how any of that will work, or if Diane will kind of stay quote unquote on top by herself. But I think that has to come up in the future episodes. I don't think that they cannot address that, especially having seen in the past season where Will is suspended and not allowed to practice. So many people want to step in and take his place then. I mean, it'll be interesting to see who tries to step up and take that spot, and whether or not Diane lets them, because she is now the only founding partner, named partner, to kind of make that decision, even though they can get vetoed by the majority vote. There's definitely, as a managing partner, some executive privileges that she's gonna have to use, I think, in these upcoming episodes that we have to finish off the season. I also think, just kind of, I guess, going back to talk about the whole situation and still sort of the shock of Josh being off the show and there being no more Will, although there's absolutely still a Will. I mean, he's very much a part of this episode. He will very much be a part of probably the episodes throughout the rest of the season, but he's not going to be acting in any of them, but I just think that seeing Diane and Alicia together talking about Will being gone in the past 2 weeks is probably my favorite thing, because as a woman and as an actress, I love this show because it has a female lead, and that she's kind of always been the glue for all of the storylines that go throughout the show. And now Will's gone. One of the lead characters, one of the series regulars on the show is gone, and it's one of the men. And so now we have Alicia, Kalinda, Diane, and will they bring in somebody else? Will there be a guy? I don't know, but I am just sort of loving their talk and just kind of seeing these two powerhouses of actresses together kind of running the show. And I want to credit that back to the writers again, because it's their fault that Diane and Alicia are sitting in that room, and that they actually, for the first time, address Alicia and Will's relationship. I mean, Will and Diane had spoken a brief time about it because Diane basically said, cut it out. But Alicia and Diane have never actually talked about it. And I love, very simply, all that they said was that, you know, Diane says, he loved you. And I'm sure that with it being the last call and not knowing what that voicemail was about and not knowing what he was going to call back about, hearing those words from Diane probably spiraled all of the what ifs or hypotheticals of what that conversation could have been. Had he called back? Had she answered? And whether or not he was going to confess his love, or whether or not he still was in love with her, like Diane says. And, you know, we'll have to see that in the coming weeks. I guess now's as good a time as any to lay out my predictions because, let's be honest, we were all completely wrong up to this point with the huge shift that we have from Will dying. So my predictions for the rest of the season, I think we have 6 or 8 episodes left, are that it's a turning point. I think we'll continue to see just the women. I think they won't bring anybody else in this season, and we'll just get to see the process of Alicia grieving. Already have a sneak peek of the fact that Alicia's marriage is going to suffer and struggle yet again, but this time it's on Alicia's terms, and it's because of Alicia's choices and her actions and what she's dealing with Will. So I feel like, I don't know if it'll be by the end of the season, but I feel like we're going to see another separation and maybe a divorce, because I don't think Peter's going to put up with Alicia and her indiscretions, if you will, the way that Alicia put up with his. And I think that we'll get to see a softer side of Kalinda. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will be back with Miriam to fully recap these episodes. And thank you so much for watching. You can find me on Twitter at COUHEN.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.
Thank you for watching AfterBuzz TV on YouTube. For more of your favorite after shows and interviews, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion on the episode in the comment section below here. We'd love to see what you guys are buzzing about. Thanks again. Buzz you later.